Welcome to the Plone Podcast. I'm not sure which edition. I like to call it Radio Free Plone, but I guess some people find it offensive. Something about propaganda not being welcome. And propaganda, I say propaganda because it's really the truth, right?
Yeah.
And with me is Paul Roeland, longtime Plone Foundation President, no longer currently president, but Plone Foundation board member. The benevolent matriarchy has ended for now. And so, Paul, you're wearing blue again today.
Yes, I like the color blue, so I quite often dress in blue. Back in the younger days, my hair was blue, but yeah.
I was going to say that's a very kind blue for Plone people, because it looks to me like it's exactly the Plone blue.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
So you're saying that you've gone for a walk and it's been unseasonably cold for you. Tell me how cold.
Well, it's not that cold. It's 6 degrees right now, but it was 23. So it's a bit of a shock to the system to have that drop in like one day.
Yes. 6 would be pleasant for me. I think it's probably around that here. What are we looking at here? Okay, now this computer is on Fahrenheit, so it's 52. So it's a little bit warmer here than it is where you are. In hospitable Amsterdam, which I was just sharing with Paul, an article in the New York Times yesterday about how tourists are not welcome or were not welcome, and then COVID hit, and suddenly now maybe you're missing a bit of the tourists.
Well, yeah, I think the city misses it because of the income. But I must say most people were, in the beginning of the whole COVID thing, that was like the blessing in disguise that finally we had Amsterdam to ourselves again a little bit. Because, yeah, Amsterdam had been the scene of quite a bit of over-tourism, where basically half the inner city was an Airbnb, and it's just, I don't mind a couple of tourists. There were always tourists here, and they make the scene lively and they're nice. But like with most things, too much of a good thing can become way too much, and it was way too much.
I remember at the beginning of COVID looking at photos of Venice, for example, totally devoid of tourists. And it was like, man, even in a movie set, you wouldn't see that.
Yeah. And here also, like last summer, then we could still go out. Now everything is in lockdown for a while now. But it was great that you could actually go to museums. You could go to the Rijksmuseum, book a time slot, and basically have the night watch all to yourself without 20 million people with selfie sticks in front of it, which was actually quite nice.
That's not a very nice thing to say about Japanese tourists.
Everybody has selfie sticks.
Right.
That's not Japanese. The Chinese, the Italians, everybody has selfie sticks.
I remember at the Louvre, they definitely banned those selfie sticks, because you can just imagine not just the fact that you could hit other people, but you could, oops, there goes that priceless artwork.
Oops, Mona Lisa, sorry.
Well, it's not like it hasn't been repaired before.
No, but it was nice that, the Van Gogh, every museum was basically empty, and you could book time slots. And if you went sort of like on a Monday morning, there would be nobody in there, and you could really take some time for the artworks. And that was actually quite pleasant. But yeah, now we have sort of measures that nobody really understands, because you're allowed with hundreds of people in a supermarket, but you can't go with a few people into museums. So that's a bit annoying, but yeah, it is what it is.
Well, hopefully it's just a matter of few more weeks and more people will be vaccinated.
Hopefully, yeah, we're not exactly doing a great job here, but who knows?
Yeah, if only you people had followed what Americans were doing.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
for the past 4 years, you could have followed the example of the United States.
Well, we have some people here that tend to do that, but they're a small minority.
So I hope everybody who's watching this or listening to this realizes that Paul and I are good friends and we can joke about this stuff and we're just teasing each other. Although, I mean, there are some things that maybe I'm a little bit touchy about. Like just before we started this, I said to Paul, I was getting my hair and face ready for our interview. And he said, well, yeah, you don't need to do much. You have a face made for radio. Speaking of which, the Shinkansen, the Hello Kitty Shinkansen, Paul and I were, we were so fortunate to be able to go to Tokyo for the 2018 Plone Conference. And in the lead up to the Plone Conference, many Plone Conference attendees will do some sightseeing. Paul did an extraordinary tour of, I think, multiple islands of Japan.
Yeah, basically I went all, except for Sapporo, I went through basically all of it. So I took 2 weeks and I had an unlimited train card and I was not afraid to use it. And I made this special point. Japan has a brilliant train system anyway, but they also have a great many special trains that are basically tourists, but mostly for Japanese tourists. And they can range from old steam trains to there was a complete 1920s A train, which has a fully functioning cocktail bar on board, which basically goes 20 kilometers through the mountains very slowly towards the sea, and then you go back and then there's a jazz combo playing while you sit in a 1920s railway carriage that has a fully functioning cocktail bar and a jazz combo. What more do you want? So I did all of the trains I could possibly get into that time frame, and one of them was that was of course my goal, is the Hello Kitty Shinkansen, the high-speed train that runs from Osaka all the way down to the southernmost island. And yeah, so I was prepared to cheat, lie, and fight for my place on that train. And I did get on, and it was awesome.
So I remember you showed some photos of you. I mean, it looked like there was a compartment that was specially for people to get their photos taken.
Yes,
with Hello Kitty?
Yes, there is a special car that is only there. There are 3 attendants there that will take your picture. Basically, that is their job. So they position you perfectly so that the Hello Kitty bow is sort of correctly placed above your head. There's a giant Hello Kitty where you can stand next to. There's of course little souvenirs that you can buy. You can buy the limited edition T-shirt, which of course I did, because Hello Kitty. But the entire train, everything from the bathrooms to the telephones to everything is, I mean, when Japanese people want to do something, they go for perfection.
Wow. And it's a fully functioning train. That's the thing that blows my mind. It's not just an exhibit somewhere. It's a
no. It's a fully functioning. It goes quite fast, like 300 kilometers an hour. And there are also people on there who are just on there because it happens to be their train home. So you have this bunch of crazy people that are there because it's the Hello Kitty Shinkansen, and then you have the Japanese businessmen typing at their tiny laptops and doing business.
Okay, speaking of tiny laptops. Oh man, where's my Negroni? Jeez, I didn't even think of that. Speaking of tiny laptops, Paul and I shared a room at the Plone Conference in Tokyo. and it's because we're both training. I can't remember the training I gave. Oh, I remember now. Doesn't matter. But we took an evening. Actually, we took 2 evenings to go shopping because, Paul, you love very, very small laptops. And there was one that you had in mind that you'd been looking for, and you were waiting for this trip to go by. And we went to one store in, I can't remember where, and they didn't have that one. So then we ended up taking a whole evening to go to another store, and we did find it. And I want to tell our viewers, our listeners, that we spent a lot of time getting there. And then we found the thing, and Paul found the laptop, and I'm going, good, now you can buy it, we can go get dinner. And my gosh, the amount of, oh, should I, shouldn't I don't know. My God, Paul, we're in the store. You've got it in front of you. They even have it in stock. Can you just buy the bloody thing? I'm hungry. It was like 9 o'clock or something. And did you buy it?
No, I didn't. No, it wasn't quite what I wanted. Yeah. Since then, I've bought some other tiny laptops. I think I now have my most optimal one for travel. It's 8.9 inch. It has 2560 by 1600 screen resolution, which is nice. It's all aluminium. It's light. It runs quite well. It has 16 gigs of memory. It has a quad-core processor, and it was quite cheap. And I have a second monitor that is also 2560 by 1600, which is a 10-inch external model. So you have like two screens, which you can. Yeah, if you are not on the cheapest of the crappiest airlines, well, back in the time when we could still travel, you could actually have a dual monitor setup in the plane.
Wow. So is that the machine you're calling in from?
No. I have another one. No, this one actually, the one drawback, it doesn't actually have a webcam. Somehow they couldn't fit that in. So I have a bigger laptop that work provides, and that is the one that has a slightly better camera.
You have your little laptop within reach. Can you hold it up?
Yes, of course. So this is the ultra tiny one. This is the 7-inch, that fits into your jacket pocket. So that can be useful as well. That's like 1920 by 1200. But to be fairly honest, it is a bit too tiny to type comfortably for long, but it's great if you go to record a meeting because you can just, it weighs 400 grams. So you basically can put it in your bag and forget it. And then this beauty is the 8.9 inch. And it's just a great little laptop.
Wow.
And that is actually, I can type just about as fast on this one as on a normal keyboard. It is tiny, but it's good. And yes, as I said, 16 gigs. It has the same processor as the Macs before they went all M1. So it's like an Air Intel, that kind of speed, which is perfectly adequate for most things that I do while on the road. And it's still only, I think it's 700 grams, which is nice. It runs for about 8 hours without power. So that's actually quite good for such a small laptop.
Is it Japanese also?
No, it's from the good people of Shenzhen in China. And it's a lot cheaper. Shenzhen, China makes quite nice laptop. Well, all the laptops come from China in the end anyway, but this is a Chinese brand. And it was 600 euros, which is
great.
Which is a great price.
It's amazing what you can get when you beat people. Okay. All right, a little bit weird humor, a little edgy, but we'll get to that part in a moment. I'm laughing because that laptop has twice the RAM that I'm talking to you with my MacBook Air, the M1, because as you know, I'm a total Apple fanboy. Yes, I'm conflicted about it as I am about so many things, but this, for expedience, I just bought the 8 gig that was in stock. But man, that's amazing. That I would. Okay, so this is reminding me of one of the very first things you and I talked about, which was your amazing phones, because you used to have one of those big Samsung Notes before many people had them. And I was fascinated by this. And in fact, it's because you had that Note that I was dying to get a big phone like that. But of course, it had to be an iPhone. So when it finally came out, I bought a big screen phone like yours. But you also had to wear cargo pants all the time to be able to carry the thing.
Yes, indeed. That is the disadvantage of having large phones. But I like small laptops and large phones. Yes.
The first time I remember meeting you, because I don't think it was before 2010. I think it was at 2010 when you came to Penn State to the Plone Symposium East, and you gave the keynote. And I remember being blown away by the stories you told about the activism, about mobile phones and the technology, and being able to provide the technology to people who weren't, in the rich countries with the most powerful phones and the best data connections. I remember being so struck by your activism. So can you tell our listeners also more about what got you to become such an activist?
Well, it probably always was somewhere inside of me. But it basically came out when I was studying. I grew up somewhere in a small place in the Netherlands, yada, 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 went to university, decided to study geophysics, which is a great study. I can recommend it. It gets you places. But yeah, at that time, I was also already being involved in various kinds of activism. There was the squatting movement, LGBTQ movement, and also, basically with geophysics, everybody expects you to go work for Shell and look for more oil. That was not my plan. My thesis was on predicting earthquakes and making better earthquake predictions and see if we could save lives that way. And I was and I still am of the opinion that whatever oil is left, we should leave in the ground. And if we bring it out, we should make very useful stuff out of it and not burn it up to move big lumps of steel from A to B. So that was a bit of my thing. And then I had various positions, but I worked for Friends of the Earth for quite a while because I was attracted to the environmental movement, but I was also a bit sort of like, well, you folks, you could do with a bit of science in your life. And I think the environmental movement deserves science as much as the opposition. So I was like, okay, I actually know mathematics and science and stuff. So let's not go work for Shell, but let's go work for the opposition that opposes Shell. But at least bring that knowledge into it so that we can, talk more on an equal level. And I've also always been quite involved in the whole sort of like hacking in the good sense. I don't mean getting into other people's computer, but hacking in the hacktivism sense of making sure that people own their own machines, own their own data, can tinker. We did quite a bit of back in the days when even in Amsterdam, it was quite uncommon to have internet because it was really expensive. So we opened up community internet free internet cafes using recycled computers, running Linux, so that people could come in that would otherwise not be able to use the internet. So yeah, we did quite a bit of that. Yeah, and that was quite fun to do. We even had a mobile internet station on one of those cargo bikes, powered by actually bike power and solar power, that we could bring to actions. So we would have, we had one of the first 3G, it was back in the days, but sort of mobile connections. So we could actually do live reporting from demonstrations, and put news out on the internet before even the actual news media could do it, because we had a better connection. Wow. And that was it. It was just fun to do, and it's also, yeah, it was just, yeah, it's fun, and it is something that gives me pleasure, and it's creative, and yeah. So that grew and grew, and yeah, then I started working for the Clean Clothes Campaign, which is a nonprofit organization that works in the garment industry, which is one of the most evil industries there is, in a lot of senses, in the human rights sense, also in the environmental sense, but most of all in how they treat the people that actually make the garments. And yeah, so I came there more or less as a techie, but also doing a lot of content work. And there, since it is a worldwide network, you have to deal with people living in Bangladesh who obviously don't have a computer, who will probably also never in their lives own a computer. I mean, most of them by now have some kind of smartphone, but that's about the most powerful device that they will ever own, given current salary levels. So you have to work with that, and you have to work with people who never completed any kind of secondary education. So you have to make things understandable for people who left school at 12 to go work in a garment factory. So yeah, that puts limits on it, on what you can do, but it's it's a challenge, but it's a challenge that I relish. And it's also, I find it hard to say, like, why did you become an activist? I'm sort of like, I just don't really react well to injustice. When I see it, I'm just like, no, not happening, not on my watch. And of course you have to, you can't solve the whole world, but you try to do what you can. And I always ask myself, like, why don't other people become activists, rather than ask myself, like, why did you become an activist? It's like, of course you become an activist. I mean, look around you. Duh. So I find that question, I find the question, why don't more people become activists, actually, to me, more mystifying. I mean, it can also, I don't know, I've always had, I simply don't have a big desire. Well, I have a desire for luxury, but affordable luxury, like a nice glass of Aperol Spritz. But I never felt that desire to have a giant car, or to have a house that is bigger than the neighbors, or those kinds of status symbols just don't do it for me. I said, I like my little luxuries. I like a good glass of wine. I like buying teeny tiny little computers. I'm not Greta. I'm not holier than thou. But
did you just sideswipe Greta?
No. No, I admire her a lot. No, but I'm not like, I do not live by the strictest standards, which I probably should, but I just don't, because I do want to keep my life also fun. But like the whole big, let's have a huge career. That was, I mean, I did work for Oracle for 3 months, which was a huge disappointment. It made tons of money, but it was completely ridiculous. I was basically, if you had really shot your Oracle database to smithereens and nobody could fix it, I would fix it. So you can basically ask any price whatsoever because their Oracle database is broken. And if you have an Oracle database, you have money. But basically, the whole culture thing just didn't work. They were like, yeah, you should wear a suit and a tie. And I'm like, I'm in a basement talking to a computer. The computer doesn't react much better if I have to wear a tie. That I work a lot less efficient if I have to wear a tie because I hate it. And the computer really, honestly doesn't care. And then they were also like, yeah, but, oh yeah, and by the way, we bought you a BMW to go to the clients. And I was like, I have a perfectly functioning, battered up old car. I can't even remember what make it was. It had a few dents, but it ran. It got me from A to B. And they were like, yeah, but the image of the company. And I'm like, well, the image of the company should be whether you fix their bloody database and not if you have a big, shiny, expensive car. To me, that would signify we overcharge you because we can buy big, shiny cars. But apparently that is not the logic in that kind of world. So after, I think 6 months I worked there, I was like, no, this is so not me. I will happily take an immense pay cut and go work for Friends of the Earth and be happy.
Wow, Paul, this is great stuff. I had no idea you'd done all that. I mean, I remember some of the early stuff you'd done, but your story about what you wear reminds me. I have a friend, I guess a colleague from 30 years ago, and he and I were going to Washington, D.C. to meet a company to talk about potentially a partnership or an acquisition. And he shows up at the airport wearing shorts, t-shirt, and sandals. And I go, come on, man, like we're going to meet company people. Like this is a high level meeting. And he said, well, if I wear anything too fancy, they're going to look at me and go, this can't be a good programmer. And therefore, our credibility is shot. And I go, yeah, okay, I can see that.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe in dressing up for the occasion. I could have worn, because when they were also sort of like, yeah, shouldn't you wear a suit? And I was like, I have a lovely Chanel power suit, but that was not exactly what they were meaning. So yeah, no, it was just, I don't know. There is this culture where also all they could talk about on Mondays was sort of like how much money they had spent on the weekend. And I was like, well, I didn't spend any money. I sort of met some friends and we had fun and that was it. And they were like, no, we went to this hyper expensive place. And I was like, okay, if that floats your boat, but it's not interesting to me.
I remember many of the times we've been out together at conferences, and I remember, well, I knew how little money you were making when you were working at Clean Clothes, certainly those many years ago, and it was astounding to me how little money you were making, and yet you lived life, it seemed to me, like the biggest, best, most entertaining, richest life of anybody I've known. Of course, it meant that when we settled the bar tab, it was a bit of a shock.
Yeah, I don't make much money, but oh well, I make enough money to have a comfortable life. Let's put it at that. But yeah, I'd have to make some choices. I can't go to expensive restaurants, but that's a very small price to pay. And usually when traveling, well, back in the days when traveling was still a thing, like for instance, for most of the Plone conferences, I was the person staying in a youth hostel, which actually usually is a lot more fun than one of those soulless hotels. So I met the nicest people, sharing an Airbnb or sharing a youth hostel. also for Plone conferences. I met Hector from Mexico on one of my first, at the 2007 Naples conference, in a very tiny, very cute, very rundown youth hostel, and we didn't know that we were there for the same conference, and we became very good friends. It's quite fun.
What was the first Plone conference you went to then?
The very, very first Vienna one. That must have been 2004.
Or yeah, I think.
Yeah, the one in the completely insane disco.
Oh man. Yep, I'm jealous. Right, like my first was 2008. So
that was, yeah, it was fun. That was also what typified Plone for me, because I was actually quite nervous going there because I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anything about Plone either, except from that we had just installed it and built our own intranet on it because it did the job. So I was like, but I actually have no clue how it is doing it, but it's working. So maybe I should go to the conference and learn a little bit. But I was quite shy because I was like, well, I have no clue what I'm doing. It works, it runs, I can put things on it. And we're quite happy, but it's kind of magic what it does. And so let's see. So, and yeah, you're quite, yeah. Immediately you run into all these people that are sort of like, ooh, these are sort of like these are the real people that sort of invented this, and they're so much more knowledgeable and wow. And they were like, hey, welcome, what are you doing? And yeah, utterly approachable, utterly friendly. None of them were sort of like, why are you even here, you nitwit, you newbie? No, they were like, great. And they were like, well, you installed this on your own and you managed. And I was like, yeah, but I don't really have an idea of how it's doing it deeper inside. And they were like, no, but you did that and you built it. And I was like, yeah, but it's only small, there's only 200 users on it. And they were like, okay, welcome.
Was that for Clean Clothes campaign?
No, that was for Friends of the Earth.
Based in Amsterdam.
Yes, that was Plone 0.99 RC3, my very first Plone version that I used. They were based in Amsterdam, and yeah, we had an intranet for basically, ourselves, but also most of the organizations around the world. And it was not that complicated because we basically had no content types because everything was in there. It was enough. It was basically standard, but it was quite happy. We were quite happy. We had the Hello Kitty skin on it.
Get out.
No. We had the Hello Kitty skin on it, which was basically just exactly the same, only in pink. It wasn't much of a skin. It was like, I don't know, five CSS definitions or something.
I'd forgotten about that theme.
Yeah, that was fun. But no, I was super impressed at how friendly the whole Plone community was. And I was like, yeah, this is really great fun. And yeah, so, and I haven't missed a Plone conference ever since.
I guess it's not surprising to me that was your reaction to meeting people in Plone. It was my reaction to meeting people in Plone was, oh my gosh, these people are very nice and they're very welcoming and they're very accepting and they're open to anybody being involved. Does that seem to you also to be a unique characteristic of Plone? Or is that more widespread? Is that a Python thing, or what is it about Plone that makes it this way?
I think, well, Plone has its even strong. I think Python also has its, but the community, of course, is a lot larger. Plone, well, we used to be bigger as well, but we were still, at least for conferences, so small that you would actually get to see everybody. I mean, it's harder to meet everybody on a EuroPython or a PyCon when there's like 5,000 people, because that's just a lot. But 400 people is still manageable, where you haven't spoken to everybody, but you have at least nodded to them in the lunch line. So I think, yeah, the sort of the size matters, but also it is something that Plone is very good at. This whole community feel and this whole being welcome. And I haven't seen that. I have been to quite a number of other open source conferences, and I haven't seen that quite as strong. I think the only other community where that is very much so is the Write the Docs community, who also make a very conscious effort to welcome everybody.
Which reminds me, the way you recruited me. Okay, I say recruited. I mean, it's not like anything dark and seedy, although, maybe a little bit of that afterwards. But I guess the activism in you, I find very interesting, because I also have that feeling that sometimes I look at people and go, why aren't you fighting? Why aren't you yelling at this craziness that you see before you? Why aren't you doing something about it? And that's probably why I started getting more involved in the Plone community. And I did this symposium here at Oshkosh. And you were so kind in helping to bring people to the symposium. I got to say, I did not expect people to come from Europe. And you came and you brought others. And I was like, oh my gosh, I remember my boss at the time was going, you got Europeans to come to this thing? And you were standing outside the new residence, the new dorms that had just been built on campus, and you were having a smoke break as usual. And I was standing there talking to you. It was the very end of the conference, and we were doing the sprints at the end. And I can't remember what it was. I think I told you maybe I was interested in joining the board, and you said something like, don't underestimate, your energy or something like that. And it was really nice of you to say that. So I think of the smart people in Plone, the welcoming people in Plone, the affirming people in Plone.
Yeah. No, it's something that we shouldn't get too smug. That we could also always do better. And there are still, of course, areas that are hard. Traditionally it has always been harder for people from less well-to-do regions to come to conferences. We had some success with the Google Summer of Code students. That was a good thing. And I think one of the positive things of the online experience this year was that we also had more people from Africa, from other continents attending, because it is also a privileged thing to get off to potentially expensive. Oh God, Boston was so expensive. But traveling anywhere is sort of like not everybody can afford that. So there are still, and I think that's one of the things we can see, while I still also truly believe there is so much value to be had in having a face-to-face meeting just for the interpersonal contact. We should probably also have a hybrid model, so that at least people who do not have the means to travel can be somehow part of it. I think it was also great that we consciously, over the years, tried to spread the Plone conference. We had a conference in Brasilia, which I think was awesome because it coincided also with the Python Conference, Brazil. We had the one in Tokyo. We consciously also had several in the eastern parts of Europe, Budapest, Bucharest, and I think that was really good also to allow other people to come. But yeah, we've never managed, although we tried to have one in Africa. At one point, we were discussing to have one in Cape Town. We could still maybe one day, or have it in Kenya or whatever. But yeah, it's just it takes also a local group to be strong and have it. There was talk of there could potentially be one in Bangkok or maybe some other places. So that's one way to spread it out. But still, some people will just not have the means to attend. So there's always more that we can do. So we shouldn't get too smug, but on the whole, we're a pretty welcoming community. Yeah.
I like the idea. I'm sure others have talked about it, but traveling through Plone, being able to visit all these amazing places and get to know them and spend several days, sometimes a week or longer in a country you would never have had the excuse to go visit. It was like that for me to go to Bucharest. I mean, wow, to be in a place that's, just changing. It seemed like it was a slow motion change, but to move away from the dark times when they were behind the Iron Curtain and opening up and being able to see the place as it was changing like that. I would love to be able to keep having those experiences. But as you say, the virtual conference that we had was really eye-opening to the extent that we got people to join from countries that were so far off the beaten path for us, people who had never been to a physical conference, and yet there they were, talking, presenting, meeting other people, making connections. I think I would very much like to see a hybrid model also. And
one of the best experiences, one of my favorite talks this year was from the person from Malaysia who is running an anti-corruption website based on Plone. I don't think he would have been able to come to Belgium unless we had known before and we could have organized some sort of financial support. Because, well, first, it's just harder to travel from those. Only getting a visa is harder and harder in these troubled times where we're living in, where, people, more and more countries make it harder to travel. I do think hybrid would be good. I mean, we still have to find out how that works and if that diminishes, because it will be different if people are directly there and then they all go to the bar and have a talk and maybe then they forget the other people. We will have to see how that works. But there's things to be said for both.
You're on the conference committee, right?
Aren't
we supposed to meet? Aren't we supposed to meet?
It's been busy.
Yeah. No, I'm saying I was just talking to Gabrielle about the idea of how we would do a hybrid event, and she had some thoughts on it, and they make a lot of sense. And I'd like an opportunity to get a number of people in the room to discuss it some more, because for Namur this year, if we are going to make it hybrid, we have to come up with something that allows online engagement, participation. So, I mean, you and I were talking about some of the questions and answers that we might want to bring up during our talk today. I mean, is there one here that you're thinking of that you would like to say more about? I remember, one thing that I found astonishing when you were here at the symposium, you were telling me that you'd been a grad student in Ann Arbor, and I was going like, wow, this guy has been around.
I mean, and that was actually one of two of my what do you call it in English? Well, basically, after you've done the first one.
Graduate degrees?
Yeah. So I did Ann Arbor because they were quite good in earth sciences and geophysics, and I did Moscow because they were also extreme. Basically, at the time I was studying, there were 3 places in the world that were top-notch for theoretical geophysics. It was Utrecht, where I was studying. It was Ann Arbor, and it was Moscow. Moscow was better at the purely mathematics because they didn't have the funding to be like a big, basically to do expensive research. But they had a long tradition of being excellent at mathematics. So spent 6 months in Moscow when it was still proper Moscow behind the Iron Curtain, and spent 6 months in Ann Arbor. And the juxtaposition was very interesting.
What years were you there, like in Ann Arbor and in Moscow?
I was 1984 in
Reagan years.
No, I was 1988 in Moscow, and I think 89 in Ann Arbor.
So you just missed the Reagan years. What a shame.
Yeah, I noticed both of the places were cold. I was in winter in Ann Arbor, which is quite cold, and Moscow is also quite cold in winter. So to me, and I also noticed quite a bit of similarities, oddly enough.
Really? Culturally?
For a Dutch person, the amount of fake jobs in the US was always one of the culturally most astounding things that equates well with the grannies in the Moscow metro.
Fake jobs?
Yes, greeters. People that put your groceries in bags, people that tell you not to smash your head into a door at the airport, people that do random things in a store that nobody in Europe would do because we would be like, well, go figure it out yourself. There seem to be quite a number of jobs in the US that are probably really low paid and have an astounding number of non-white people and also elderly people working there, which would have been because, well, we have quite a high minimum wage. Nobody would dream of doing that here because A, it's expensive, and B, it would be considered degrading and useless anyway. And the same was true in Moscow, which technically had full employment because, hey, that's what we do as communists. But some of the jobs were questionable on their usefulness. Let me put it like that.
Did you pick up any Russian?
Yeah, but I lost most of it. I mean, I can still read it. I can read the alphabet, and but I can't really speak it anymore. It's if you don't practice. I mean, I never really took a course, so I only picked it up sort of what I had to. And at the university, well, you mostly speak in formulas and Greek letters anyway. So I couldn't speak proper Russian anymore. But I mean, yeah, the alphabet is quite easy to learn, and most of the languages or most of the words are vaguely known from other Slavic languages as well. So it's not that hard. But yeah, at the time I could, but it's also now 30 years ago. 35 years ago, you just forget if you don't practice.
Sure.
But also, yeah, some of the bureaucracy is also, I found it quite similar. But plus, and some of the airport entrances. I mean, JFK airport always seemed remarkably like an Eastern European airport. in the whole bureaucraticness, in the whole unfriendliness of the officers, in the fact that you get actual physical stamps in your passport, and they look at you with an evil eye for like 5 minutes. I found basically the similarities quite amusing in a way.
It is amusing, although sad. So, Paul, tell us about your film festival.
Yes, for the past, 24 years, I have been involved in a film festival, the Roze Filmdagen, which is the Amsterdam LGBTQ film festival, which started out really, really small in typical activist fashion. We had a larger festival and that sort of the last one happened in 1991, and then there was supposed to be another one, and it never happened. So we came together with a bunch of people and we're like, well, we can't not have an LGBTQ film festival in Amsterdam. That's just not happening. But nobody's doing it. Okay, then we're going to do it. So we started out really small, but over the years it grew bigger and bigger, and a bit more professional, and a bit more. I'm very proud of it. It's my hobby. I do the website, which is obviously Plone based, but I also do the programming. So I select the movies with 2 other people. It's last year it was quite sad because our opening was supposed to be on the 12th of March. We had huge amounts of food and champagne for the fabulous opening night. And the 12th of March, at 8 o'clock, we were opening, and at 7 o'clock, the government had a press conference saying everything now is cancelled. So, yeah, what do? Well, we drank all the champagne because what else can you do?
Of course.
Of course. No,
First thing to do.
Well, we had to eat the food because, you can't throw away the food. Very cleverly, we had sort of 2 weeks before taken out insurance because we were like, oh, it is getting closer. I think maybe we can still have it, but by the end of March, this is probably. But how much is the insurance? 3,000. Yeah, let's do it. So in the end, we actually didn't go bankrupt. So that was great because we got most of the money back from the insurance. Then during the summer, we could show some of the movies in a very restricted setting, but it was a bit silly. You basically have like 150 people cinema in which you can only allow 35 people, which is just sad. So this year we had a fully online festival, which went quite well, but it's also weird. We sold 10,000 tickets and people were like, yay, it's great. And I'm like, well, actually, I haven't seen anybody. So, whereas indeed, again, there were also some positive sides because normally we mostly get people from Amsterdam, and this time we could get people from all over the Netherlands, not outside of the Netherlands because film distributors get very paranoid about copyright and stuff. So you always have to keep a geofence. But yeah, we did have quite a number of people from all areas of the Netherlands. So that's a positive thing. But you do miss the whole community part. You miss talking about the films afterwards in the lobby with a beer or a wine, and just chatting. You miss some of the more we had some side programming, but still, so we had some debates and discussions, but they miss audience interaction as well. So you have some interesting guests, but the audience cannot ask questions because they had to be pre-taped because we didn't have a live studio that was big enough, and things like that.
So and this is not at all trying to sell anything, but you've seen what Loudswarm does, right? So it is possible to do a live stream and obviously keep things recorded, but couldn't you use something like Loudswarm and show the films? You'd need the geofencing, but show the films at a certain time. You'd have tracks. You'd have basically a different scene.
No, you also need much higher video quality streaming. So you need a specialized provider to do that, to do full HD streams, because people pay for it, so they expect it to be full HD. For the debates, maybe we could, but then it was a risk for us because we had no clue if anybody would show up and we would go bankrupt anyway. But in the end, no, it was a success, and we will probably have some kind of hybrid thing as well. But we did miss also. We usually also have things like we organize special screenings for secondary school classes, which is one of our most important sort of like outreach tools to talk about bullying, to talk about respect, to talk about diversity. And you can't do that, and you certainly can't do those kinds of discussions online because you need the physical presence of their teacher, and they need to be in a safe environment and whatever. And we were just like, we're so not going to do this. We're not going to have anybody come out to their classmates on a Zoom meeting. Sorry, not happening. You need a safe environment, and you need to be physically in the same space with experienced sort of counselors and stuff like that to do that. So there is something missing. So hopefully next year we can do a real film festival again, but also maybe show some of the highlights again and then as a online version. But this is not. It's a film festival. The most important thing for us is the quality of the films, like the cinematographic, but being an LGBTQ film festival also means you tackle some serious issues. And for some of those, online is just not the most optimal way to build community or to support people.
Mm-hmm. I'm reminded of when you describe safe space, safe environments, and sensitivity to issues that people are facing. The Plone Code of Conduct is a result of, I think, your bringing it up and asking us to have one. I know others had already had something like that, but that you're the driving force behind the Plone Code of Conduct. I remember, I think we were reacting to what had happened for one of the PyCon events also. Yeah. And then at the university here in Oshkosh, we had one incident where it was like, what's going on? Yeah. So anyway, the code of conduct, very important thing. And it's thanks to you that we have it. Actually,
thanks to others as well. But I do think it's a very a code of conduct is only as good as the implementation. But I've been also on the reacting teams for that. So it shouldn't be just a piece of paper. It should really be sort of like something that people care about. And I do care about that a lot. So those are some of the things I think I am relatively proud of. I'm probably not so proud of having upped the use of GIFs in presentations to sort of like slightly dizzying heights.
Your last talk was, I think, an entire movie. I mean, it was essentially just non-stop.
Yes. I have to have this tendency to use too many GIFs and videos as backgrounds because
I love it. It's your style, and it's very entertaining. It's very different from the very staid, here's 3 points, let's talk about them. Here's 3 more points, let's talk about them. No, please keep doing it. Actually, do you know of any clones of yourself? How can we get more Paul Roelands in Plone? How can we get more Paul Roelands in everything?
There are more people. I mean, I always go to Eric Breaux's talks about anything. No matter what the topic, it's always extremely entertaining how he does it. Rico Pekka has an entertaining style of making presentations. But yeah, Eric Braho topped it all this year with his projection on a t-shirt. That was totally amazing. If you haven't seen it, go see it. Even if you don't understand half of what he's saying, it's still entertaining, which is the hallmark of a good talk. Annette does amazing talks. So yeah, there's more people.
But what I'm also thinking about is your engagement, the way you, I don't know how to phrase it, the way you recruit. No, it's not even recruiting. The way you attract people to a cause and you convince them. You're just a great person to follow. I've learned so much from spending time with you. I would like there to be more people like you in our community, among my friends, but also just in everything around. You just make things so much better.
Oops. Makes me slightly uncomfortable, but yeah.
Well, it's true.
Shall we talk about something else?
Okay. All right. Well, tell me what you're working on. What's the current project you're working on?
Well, I haven't. It's one of the reasons I haven't been very active within Plone the last year, because as soon as the pandemic hits, basically my work at Clean Clothes Campaign tripled. Because, as I mentioned before, the fast fashion industry is not a nice industry, and they managed to show themselves in their most callous form, which basically meant we had to go full throttle campaigning. So I've been basically working 7 days a week mostly since last March on doing that. I mean, in the first few months, they basically dropped 40 billion worth of orders. We've now managed to claw back 26 trillion of that. Billion. Yeah, I always get confused with the American numbers. Billions. Yeah. Which is good for a bunch of people like us, but it's still not good enough. So yeah, that has taken an awful lot of my time. But I do work quite a bit on the computer side these days with data visualization and basically data storytelling, because we have been pushing quite hard in the fashion industry for there to be more transparency, so that we know where factories are, so that we know how many people work there, so that we know which brands order from these places. And now we are getting more and more of that data. But now we need to use that data. So that also means getting more information on that, presenting that in a way that will help consumers make better decisions, but also help workers to quickly find out, like, how can I get access to remedy if I have been fired because I started to form a union? What are my options? Can I go to this? Can I go to an international gremium to basically get my rights? But also telling stories about how many factories have been closed, how big the wage gap is between what people are earning, what the mostly female workers are earning, and what a living wage would be. If you put that in numbers, everybody's going to look the other way. If you put that in graphics, in terms of like, well, this is what it buys you, namely a bowl of plain white rice with nothing, whereas a living wage would be a bowl of rice with some vegetables and some sauce and maybe even a bit of tofu or chicken. That makes it much more illustrative and easy to understand. So I've been working with a lot of tools to make data visualization and data storytelling. But they've been mostly outside of Plone because, I haven't been able to graft them onto Plone. That is something that, we've been working with things like Airtable, which is proprietary, which is super annoying, but it is great. Flourish, Studio, Raw Graphs. Those are all excellent tools. Some of them are open source, some of them are not, but I would love to have more sort of like data visualization tools within Plone where you can really tell a story, where you can do basically, different kinds of graphics, different kinds of plots, in a way that is really appealing and not too much too dry, so that only our aficionados appreciate it, but that you can actually use them on a website to tell a story. And that's something I would like once the situation gets a bit more back to normal, and we also get a more easy interface when Plone becomes all new and Volto, and most of these other tools are also React and JavaScript heavy. So I think the integration will become quite a bit easier because they can then be integrated as React components. That's something I look forward to see if I can play and develop a little bit more with that.
Well, hopefully one of the viewers or listeners will have some time on their hands and will want to try to help get something like that going for Volto or for Plone.
Yeah, I think, well, it will make it because, most of the front end things now do have sort of like usually a React component or a React interface layer. And I think that would make it easier also for relative programming nitwits like me. I'm good with data, but I was never quite good at integrating things into Plone where it was sort of like, how do I integrate a JavaScript thingy into a Plone thingy? That always, I don't know, it never worked quite the way that I wanted. But since we now will have a front end that's already based on that, it makes it a whole lot easier. And not that I'm a good JavaScript programmer, but I'm a really good integrator. I connect things. That will work. But I could never make that work with Plone Classic because, I would either have to stay like, I can do this completely in Python and the Plone way, or I can do it JavaScript, but the thing in between, it never quite worked for me. I would do sort of like the resource registry and then throw salt over my left shoulder at a full moon and slaughter some furry animal and hope it would work. And sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. And
so many slaughtered animals.
I don't know. There was always, I don't know, 2 versions of jQuery that work slightly different, and it never really worked. So I think that will become a lot easier. And I do see also a lot of new open source alternatives or data viz projects available. So that's something that's dear to my heart, because also I noticed that it is really helpful in my campaigning work to do to back up our story with data, to say like, okay, we have a story to tell, we have a case to make, but we're not just some activists who claim things. No, we have the receipts, we have the data to back this up. That makes your story a whole lot more powerful. But in order to make that resonate with the widest possible audience, you also have to have this in a graphical way that makes sense That works well on mobiles because, well, for one of my projects that we launched in the middle of the pandemic was fashionchecker.org, which is not a Plone project, but we see there that the audience is 73% on mobiles. And that was the first time where we really were like, okay, mobile first design. It's not a slogan anymore. It's something we just have to do because
what does
73% of the people watching this is on mobile.
What does the site do?
It's basically, it connects, it rates fashion brands on their transparency and their living wage policies. But what there are other sites that do that. But what we do specifically is that we actually compare that to actual wage data that we have collected, so pay slips, because some of the garment brands are really good at greenwashing and at PR, and they're like, their policies sound amazing. If you read their CSR report, you're like, oh, kumbaya, really, everything is great. And then we're like, okay, the proof is in the pudding. So we actually went to Indonesia, Bangladesh. Well, we didn't need to go there. We engaged our local partners and said, like, can we see the pay slips of the workers? That turned out to be quite a different story from all the grandiose talk about, hey, we're on our way towards a living wage. And it's like, well, no. 63 euros a month is not something where you can live off, even in Bangladesh.
Wow, that was kind of heavy.
Yeah, I mean, there's also, it's not like I sit here all day, and I mean, we are in a long and bitter struggle, but you can't let it overtake you, because then, well, I plan to be in this struggle for at least 10 more years, and you can't let it drag you down, because that will wear you down too quickly. You have to sort of inoculate yourself against some things, and also make sure that you maintain a certain, this may sound weird, but certain distance, but also sort of like learn to, like, you cannot solve everything in the world. You need to also relax and sort of like, yeah, otherwise you burn fast, but you burn very short. And this is going to take a couple of more years of my time, at least until I fix the world. No, I won't have fixed the world, but I do intend to keep doing this without getting a burnout. And that means you do have to take some time to celebrate, to relax, to take a walk, to sit in the sun and regain energy.
And have a Negroni.
Yes, and have a Negroni. Yes, definitely.
So,
or, yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course. The Aperol Spritz. Okay, so I do have to add the little story of how I got introduced to Negronis.
Yes.
So in Ferrara, the conference venue was a cinema by day. Well, actually, it was a conference venue by day and a cinema by night. And so we were in there, this is like 2019. And I don't know if it was planned. I think it might have been planned. The organizers kindly placed the cinema right next to a bar. But the hours for the bar were slightly off, because I think the conference ended at 5 or 6 o'clock, and then the bar wouldn't open until later in the evening. And the organizers went in and said, hey, would you like to have 250 people in your bar? You might need to adjust your hours a little bit, but if you did, then they would be there. And so that is the bar. And it was literally 5 steps from the door of the conference, the cinema, to the bar. And that's where Paul gave me my first Negroni. And I was under the table, but I came back for more.
I was amazed that you hadn't had a Negroni. It's such a classic cocktail. And yes, it does taste of diesel the first time you taste it, but it's great.
And Paul, you're also the guy who got me onto the Aperol Spritz in Sorrento. So I have you to thank for my liver.
The liver it needs training. You can't not have it trained, otherwise all that knowledge will slip away.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Paul. That was a lot of fun.
I would like to thank the Plone community, because you have given a bunch of scruffy activists over the years quite some powerful tools to work with, be it either us at the Clean Clothes campaign, but also Friends of the Earth, also the people in Malaysia fighting corruption. We get the full power of Plone without any restrictions, without any, you don't get this unless you have the corporate hyper expensive pay per month account. We get the full thing. It does take some time for us, but we get all of that, and we tend to do good stuff with it. And it's a tribute to the community that, now, well, in this past crazy year, of course, our numbers of people that really relied on our internet working and it actually being safe and secure, but also the number of people on our website that visited it quadrupled. And we get all of this more or less for free. So yeah, there are people that use Plone in mysterious ways, no, but in good ways. So I want to thank the Plone community and hope to be able to continue for a longer time to give something back by, I don't know, whatever I can do. I try to dabble a little bit in things. But yeah, thanks everybody for being there. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing.